Dr. Mark Changizi here with your Science Moment. Today I'm going to talk about how collective hysteria, moral panic, is only made worse by further and enhanced centralization. And we've talked a lot about the various ways in which censorship and any sort of inhibition of free expression augments collective hysteria, and many of the kinds of things that can seed and many of the kinds of effects, psychosocial effects, concerning collective hysteria. But now China, over the last few weeks, has provided a great example of collective hysteria and censorship. Prima facie, what you see in China is exactly what you expect. You have the country with the greatest degree of centralized control, the greatest amount of censorship in a centralized fashion, and you also have apparently the country that's under the greatest sway of mass hysteria, more so than Canada and more so than Australia or New Zealand. Here we have, and I'm not going to go through it carefully, but if you've surely already seen the cats and dogs all rounded up and killed, the residents of Shanghai screaming from their windows with no food for several weeks now. Folks are crowded into quarantine centers. There's the flying little quadcopters that are facial recognition of folks. Anybody that's standing on their balcony, you're not even allowed on your balcony. The Chinese believe that these interventions work. They still believe these interventions work. It was never a fake out to the West or the rest of the world that, hey, let's trick you into doing these interventions. No, they believe that they work, just as the rest of the world mistakenly believed that they work. And unlike much of the rest of the world, which is slowly realizing that they didn't work, and it was slow despite the rest of us telling you it wasn't going to work, China hasn't learned a thing. And you know who doesn't learn things are folks under the sway of centralized censorship. Their free expression works least well of all. So here we have China with 1 billion folks in it who are in basically a living hell, if they already, and they already were for many years. And their government cares about them in the way that, communist authoritarians do. They really believe that this is the best thing for our city, and they don't really particularly care for individual rights or anything, but they believe that at the largest scales, they're probably maximizing the number of people that they're saving by virtue of doing these authoritarian measures. And they couldn't be more wrong, and they couldn't have learned less in the last 2 years. And you don't need some kind of conspiracy theory to say, why are they doing this? Are they trying to, people are still saying, I don't believe anything that's coming out of China. This is all part of some grand scheme to trick us. What are you thinking? China couldn't look worse. This is a PR disaster, right? There's no way to look good when you're going around welding back in March or February of 2020, welding people into their homes. And there's no way to look worse after 2 years of supposedly saying you were doing well. Now it's obvious that you weren't doing well. And there's no way to look worse than going around killing all the dogs and cats and having people jump from the buildings out of desperation to their deaths. This is real. They really do believe it works. They're still in a collective hysteria. And you don't get out of collective hysteria faster by having further centralized control of the narrative. So again, this is why free expression matters. This is why we at freex.group, Dr. Tim Barber and I have been researching the foundations of free expression. Our upcoming book, Expressly Human, is about the foundations of how free expression works as a network to help us move towards the truth. And it's why next week we'll hopefully be appearing in court in our First Amendment case against the federal government to push back their coercion of social media to censor misinformation. The more that the federal government engages in this kind of helpful behavior, the more we move towards the state that China is in, where they can't learn from their mistakes. They have a narrative that's impossible to move or shift towards the truth. And we need to make sure we are not like that. That was your Science Moment.